Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Amila Golich, and I'm Assistant Director of Programs at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Thank you to our members in attendance today. Your support is critical to our work, and if you're not yet a member, please consider joining. We have a wide range of levels for you to choose from. Tonight's program will explore the results of a new report by the Council on Foreign Relations, and we'd like to thank the CFR for their partnership in developing this program with us. This report is called The Work Ahead: Machines, Skills, and U.S. Leadership in the 21st Century. And if you haven't done so already, please do pick up a copy of the report at one of the tables in the back or on the sides. Please note that the Council is an independent and nonpartisan platform. The views expressed by the individuals we host are their own and do not represent institutional positions or views of the Council. Please silence your phones, but not your voices. This event is on the record. We are live streaming, and we encourage your social media engagement. Later, we'll be taking audience questions through mics around the room, as well as online at chi.cnf.io. Finally, to say a few more words about the topic today and to welcome our speakers, I would like to introduce and welcome to the stage Mr. Bill Mahoney. Bill is the founding partner of law firm Siegel, McCambridge, Singer, and Mahoney. He's also a Chairman Circle member at the Council. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Bill Mahoney to the stage.
Thank you, Amila, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Our topic, the work ahead, machines, skills, and U.S. leadership in the 21st century, is tremendously important and extraordinarily timely. What is the nature of work in the 21st century? We do know it has changed radically. The Industrial Revolution, which defined the last 150 years, is in our rearview mirror. Instead, with a speed that is stunning and often destabilizing, automation, artificial intelligence, and technological breakthroughs are changing the landscape on a daily basis for workers, companies, societies, and governments. And it's a global phenomenon. A new Council on Foreign Relations report, The Work Ahead, analyzes what confronts the U.S. in developing new work opportunities. It also examines reforming and restructuring our educational system to better align our education and training with workplace demands and job demands. So the question is, what is the pathway for economic security in this environment? Will the changes result in increased economic inequality? Will the middle-class ethos of the U.S. hold? And can our political system handle the stresses caused by the economic dislocations related to these changes? Furthermore, how can we compete with countries that have stronger traditions of apprenticeships programs and worker training? Luckily, there are many issues, but our panel tonight is well crafted by experience and history to address them. They are going to chart some policy recommendations for us all to address these issues. So a few introductory words about our speakers tonight, a very distinguished panel. James Coleman is partner and senior managing director of Accenture's Chicago office. As a member of Accenture's North America leadership team, he mentors local workforces and leads Accenture's participation in an apprenticeship program run in collaboration with the City Colleges of Chicago. Penny Pritzker is founder and chairman of PSC Partners and its affiliates, Pritzker Realty Group, PSAB Capital, and PSP Growth. Previously, she served as Distinguished Secretary of Commerce under President Obama in his second term. She has recently served as chair of the Council on Foreign Relations Independent Task Force, which produced the report, The Work Ahead, which we are discussing and addressing tonight. Juan Salgado is Chancellor of the City Colleges of Chicago, overseeing the city's community college system and its more than 80,000 students. He was previously the CEO of Instituto del Progreso Latino, where he led community and skill-building programs for residents of Chicago's Southwest Side. And our moderator is Ted Alden. He is the Bernard L. Schwartz Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Specializing in economic competitiveness, his most recent book is Failure to Adjust: How Americans Got Left Behind in the Global Economy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelist and moderator to the Chicago Council of Global Affairs.
thank you very much for being here. Thank you to Amila and Bill for that generous introduction. I am delighted to be here at the Chicago Council, and especially to be up here with Secretary Pritzker, who was such a great leader on this project as co-chair of the task force, along with John Engler, the former Michigan governor and now interim president of Michigan State University. We pulled together what I think was a really exceptional group of people to work on this report. The hard copy is here. It's on the CFR.org website, and there's an online presentation that I think is worth taking a look at. The report looked at what we all believe to be the critical question of our time, which is how to create new opportunities and career paths for Americans in the face of the transformation of work brought about by new technologies and rising global economic competition. We looked at many issues: how to ensure that the United States remains a technological leader, how to bring economic opportunity to struggling regions, how to increase mobility so that Americans can move to where the jobs are being created, and how to redesign our benefit systems, retirement, healthcare, sick leave, vacation, maternity leave, and others for a world in which many more part-time and contingent workers are going to be a key part of our workforce. But the heart of the report is really the question of how education can be better aligned with work opportunities, both for young people just starting out and for those mid-career. So I'm delighted to be joined up here as well by Juan Salgado and by Jim Coleman, and they'll talk a bit about the important and innovative work they've been doing together on the Chicago Apprenticeship Network. So Penny, let me start with you. Mm-hmm. If I have discovered one thing in more than a year now of working with Penny, it is that she is involved in an extraordinary array of initiatives, both here in the city of Chicago and across the country. I'm honestly not sure when you sleep. So when my organization, CFR, comes to you and says, will you please be a co-chair on this report and lead the project, and it's going to be at least a year of hard work, and then we're going to ask you to do a whole bunch of presentations afterwards, why did you say yes? Why did you think this set of issues mattered so much?
Well, this issue's personal to me, and it's something that I've been involved in for over a decade. And I really, when you step back, why care about this? And the reason is, and we saw during our research, for example, that Pew has recently shown us that 75% of Americans have enormous angst about their current job situation and the future, their personal future, the future of their family. So for me, why did I get involved? It's because I care about opportunity, and I think one of the most important things that the United States has to offer, not only for our own citizens, but also, frankly, as a policy around the world, is we've been able to show that we know how to help people have access to opportunity. And so it's something I've been involved with for, as I said, a very long time, whether it was on the school board or starting Skills for Chicagoland's Future, or working on apprenticeship issues, like, or working with the Chicago school system.
And why now? Why do you think this is a critical issue at this particular period of time? I mean, we've seen disruption before. What's different about now?
Well, I think the awareness of Americans that technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, it's automation, as well as globalization, is affecting them in a real way and in a very rapid way. And so Americans are this angst that we're seeing in our country about our future, about individuals feeling that they're insecure. And so for us, going to work on what are the policy ideas feels like a constructive way to spend time. And one of the things I love about our report is we really looked at the policy issues at the federal level, at the state and local level. What could we as business leaders do? What could our pre-K through 14 leaders do, as well as our universities? And then we looked at what could NGOs do. So it's really a plan. The thing Governor Engler and I really agreed upon is this is not some academic work. This is instead an effort to really lay out what could you do. Here's a menu of choices. We surveyed the country as to what's working. You did an enormous amount of work, as did everybody on our task force. And so for me, the idea of coming together to really compile best ideas and create a menu for leaders in various areas, both federal, state, local, business, NGOs. Just made a lot of sense.
Thank you. Juan, I want to ask you, one of the things that we focused on in the report, and we talked about this a bit on our call before the session tonight, is the extraordinarily rapid pace of change. You know, depending on which researchers you believe, and we went through all the research out there on the impact of robotics and artificial intelligence and digitization on jobs, and you get, you know, some researchers, we had Susan Lund from McKinsey on the task force who say, well, probably a third of jobs in the United States are going to change significantly over the next 2 decades as a result of automation. Out to an extreme, you know, a couple of Oxford researchers who are saying, look, half of all jobs in the United States could disappear, could be replaced by machines in that period of time. And so Americans are clearly going to have to learn new skills if they're going to adapt, to pivot to the new jobs that are being created. As an educator, how do you try to respond to that? How do you try to keep up with that pace of change?
I think it starts by organizing ourselves in a way that we can be continuously responsive. So at City Colleges of Chicago, one of the things that we've done is ensured that each of our colleges has an industry focus in a high demand area of growth in our economy, ensuring that the presidents of those colleges are focused on how do I drive value to leaders in that industry? How do I drive value to Jim over at Accenture? Or how do I drive value to Rush? Or how do I drive value to Aon and its related companies? And I think that means that then our colleges become knowledge centers in the moving and the dynamic nature of that labor market. That means we become better decision makers, right? And then there's some mechanical things that we need to do to make sure that every one of our courses, every one of our certifications stack upon each other. So, you know, you're a student, you can go out into the workforce when opportunity presents itself, and you can come back into education when opportunity presents itself. And so, you know, getting our students in the mindset to see this economy as an opportunity economy, because in fact it is. There are, at any given moment, you know, many jobs out there that pay very, very well. And the only thing that we have to do much, much better, and I don't come from higher ed, I came from a world that, you know, Penny mentioned, where people are feeling that angst, right? They're right at the crux of, you know, where their incomes are not enough to keep up with their home, pay for their child's further education, and accumulate a little bit of wealth, right?
I mean, I think, you know, it's something that shocks us here in the United States. I'm going to let you continue, but the Federal Reserve has this annual report. The latest one just came out a few days ago. It said 40% of Americans can't scrape up $400 for an emergency expense. I mean, there are a lot of people who are really in exactly the kind of position that you described.
That's exactly right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
You know,
please.
Juan, one of the things that we've struggled with is how do you link education with work, right? And you were talking when we were preparing about the challenge of all of us working together to make it a reality so that, you know, citizens of the greater Chicago area know how to find their way to an opportunity at Accenture.
Absolutely. So, and Jim can say so much more about what the Apprenticeship Network is actually doing. What I can say is that, you know, we have within our colleges very talented students that require doors to open for them. And when those doors open, these are not doors to these are doors to real jobs where there are real value add that our students can provide to real customers on the back end that helps the businesses to actually grow. And so for us at City Colleges, we have to accelerate the pace of opening up those opportunities. You know, we have to move from being able to help 8 students to helping thousands of students. And it means going to many different companies, many different areas of opportunity in the economy. And we've seen that with the Apprenticeship Network. You know, I can talk a little later on about boot camps that we've done in cybersecurity that are beginning to open up those same kinds of doors.
Let's come back to that, and let's turn to, you know, Accenture, because, you know, at the end of the day, what Juan is talking about is preparing students for the jobs that are out there in Chicago and beyond. You know, when I first started on this report, I must admit I had a very narrow conception of apprenticeships. I thought apprenticeship, that was kind of building trades. You know, I remember when we hired electricians to rewire my daughter's bedroom, there was the guy we paid a lot and the guy we paid half, and the guy we paid half as much was the apprentice. That was kind of my thinking. So when I heard that Accenture has an apprenticeship program, I was like, what? What does that mean? So how did you get involved in this? What's the model, and why is Accenture in the apprentice business?
Yeah, no, great question. I get it asked all the time. So we actually, really, to be quite honest, happened into this about 3 years ago when I took over the location and our operations here in the Midwest. I had an opportunity to be at a breakfast, and the mayor was speaking, and he challenged a group of about 80 CEOs and executives from big companies all across Chicago. You know, how many of you have ever done this, hired a student from community college? And the number
maybe, Jim, at the outset, explain what an apprenticeship is exactly. Like, what do we mean by apprenticeship? Keep going, but I want to make sure everybody understands
So
this.
what we really decided to do out of that meeting was figure out ways we could ingest that talent into our organization. We went back and we decided that that was something we wanted to do. But like many companies, that was very new. It's very untraditional for an organization, 400,000 people, $36 billion global firm, to start to think differently about things that have worked for decades for our business. And so what we decided to do was build a program in conjunction with the city colleges on offering the students a one-year engagement in our business while they were in their second year of their coursework. And through that, we started in our IT department. It was relatively safe. Started in our IT organization. We did 5 the first year. That meeting was in December, and we had them staffed and started by May, which was a little interesting feat in a big organization to make it happen. I think at some point I just broke most of the rules, if not all of the rules, and just did it. The next year we did about 10, and then this year we just signed a week ago, I'm proud to say, 27. And the program is for us 1 year. They come in, they work in, as Juan said, value-added jobs in our business. First 2 years was in our internal IT function. This year, about half are going to go out and work on our client engagements. So if any of you work with our organization, you may see some of our apprentices in your buildings and in the work that we're doing for you, which we're tremendously excited about, and working with the community to propagate more awareness of what we're up to. The other thing I'd then put a plug out there for is, I think, as Juan said, you know, we were very fortunate enough to have our path cross with Aon, and that was about a year ago when Aon and Accenture came together. We do a lot of business with Aon. We buy a lot of services from Aon. Aon buys a lot of services from Accenture, and we sort of got together and said, why couldn't we do more together? And they had an apprentice program that they were building and developing, and we brought our work together, and now we're out there pounding the pavement trying to encourage other organizations to take, you know, do what we're doing, to participate in what we're doing. We'll get out there and help them get started if that's what it takes.
And maybe both of you just talk quickly. I mean, this means you're hiring in many ways different kinds of people that would not have come across your radar a decade ago, say, people who haven't followed the sort of traditional path through four-year university. So just talk a little bit more about that, about what it means in terms of your hiring practices and who you're attracting to the company.
Well, I mean, I'd let you speak to the demography of the school as a proxy, but I think for us, you know, maybe different in terms of their life experience or in terms of the choices that they had and the options that they had. But, you know, I think if you come into our organization, you see the people and they're working side by side with some of our four-year graduates or even graduate folks who have got master's degrees and things. The work's the work. You know, we don't check in year 2 or 3 once you're in our organization, you know, what did your degree say, like for your promotion or for your raise or for what we pay you next. We actually try to build you up and give you opportunity. And if you need more training or you need more school or you need the training we provide that. So I think that's the more important point is, yeah, they're maybe different in terms of their life experience. They're different in terms of, you know, where they were raised and maybe the opportunities that were given to them, because we don't all have the same opportunity. But on the surface, they're our employees.
And that, I just want to add, most of our students are already working. They're working 1 or 2 retail jobs in addition to the classwork work that they're doing. And so what we're doing in working with our industry partners is take their career interest, ensure that that's the coursework that they're taking, match them to the kind of job opportunity that's in high demand. And all of a sudden, you have higher likelihood of completion in post-secondary, aligned to exactly what you want to do, aligned to an employer that's going to give you the real opportunity to build the network and the skills within that industry. And you know, the other ancillary benefit is you start to free up some of those retail jobs for, you know, other folks in the economy. And so this is just a multiple win scenario. And in most of these cases, we're taking, you know, these are new jobs in many respects, or jobs that companies are having a hard time with retention, right, within them. And so, you know, from my perspective as an education leader, we need to accelerate the pace of these work-based learning opportunities. It's still too small, and I appreciate the effort of the Apprenticeship Network to say, you know what, we're 2 companies, but we're going to go out and recruit 30 to 40, you know, and add, you know, hundreds, right, to this opportunity base.
And I would just add, you know, it starts in Chicago. We're very proud of what we've been able to do here. You know, as I said, we just brought 27 of our next class in. We were targeting 25. We're going to do 27 because once you make the offers, people accept. We had one person who decided not to join us who's going to go to UIC. She decided to pursue a 4-year degree, which is fantastic. But we've also grown this outside of Chicago. So we will now do over 100 nationally this year, which we're extremely proud of. We've committed to doing 25 a year minimum here in Chicago for the next 4 years, as has Aon. And you know, we're out there, you know, trying to get your organizations, candidly, to just take a chance, to try it, to see what you can do.
Penny, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think back to 2011, before the apprenticeship effort started, before Juan, you were at city colleges. And we were trying just at that point, if you thought about, we had unemployment was north of 8 or 9%. We were trying to get the long-term unemployed into the workforce, and it required a real effort to get the business community open to the idea of hiring the long-term unemployed. Now we've got the business community, you know, through Skills for Chicagoland's Future focused on that. We've got the apprenticeship effort focused on, you know, taking folks out of our city colleges and giving them access to jobs. But this fact that we're working together across what I'm going to call silos, the business community, the education community, the local government community. I think that's one of the biggest things that we thought about when we worked on this report, is how important it is ultimately at the end of the day, people have to work together. And the truth is, you get up and frankly, Jim's #1 job isn't necessarily the apprenticeships. He runs the Chicago office of Accenture, and you have, you know, multiple campuses to run, but it's somehow deciding this is an important priority. And that's one of the challenges that we all have, is to make a decision and then to really put the resources behind it.
And so Penny, how do we get this up to scale? You know, we looked at examples from other countries. In Switzerland, you know, 75–80% of their young people are going through apprentice programs of one sort or another. And a lot of those are going on to 4-year degrees. I mean, unlike thinking in the U.S., where we're very much dual track, you're either sort of community college apprentice or your 4-year degree. They don't look at it that way in Switzerland. Everybody pretty much is getting work experience at a fairly young age. A lot of people go on to 4-year college. How do we get that to scale here in the United States, so we're not just kind of 25 here and 25 there?
I think at the end of the day, it really begins with local leadership and local leadership coming together. But there's a lot of pressure that comes to bear on the business leader, because the business leaders have to decide it's a priority. And the second is particularly our K-12 and our community college leaders have to decide they're going to put resources to work with the business community in an efficient and an effective manner, because there's not a lot of patience among business leaders to say, I'm going to screw around. I need to fill these jobs. I need to know it's reliable. I can't, I'm willing to invest in the people I hire, but I need to know it's going to work for me. And so it requires, and the third thing is greater transparency. The individuals need greater transparency. Is what are the opportunities? And how do I learn that I could work at Accenture, I could work at Aon, or I could go to work at United, or I could do these things? And what is the education that I need? And we call for a lot more transparency in that effort. And I'm interested, Juan, how do you help your students know what's possible for them and then better link their specific education to those opportunities?
So let me just say, before I address that, Penny, I think you reminded me that one of the big things that has to happen in community college is that we have to shift our mindset from being sort of education institutions to workforce pipelining institutions. And that means there's a muscle that we don't have right now, which is a muscle of actually delivering specific talent with specific skills to specific employers in the time frames that those employers require and the quantities that they require, right? And so we don't generally do that. We're not organized that way. And so we have to very quickly do that. And we are learning in the journey with Accenture and others how to best do that. And also, Jim can talk about how our students can help us to be accelerants, right? Because it's not just about how much more staff do we add, but our students themselves have networks. And so how we can be efficient in the utilization of the human capital that we have. But big part of that is at the point of entry, right? And so, we've been notoriously inefficient in the connections between K through 12 and post-secondary education. We have a situation in most of America where we've sort of disinvested in the, tech side of things, whether that's in the trades, or whether it's in the technology capacity in K through 12. But community colleges haven't. We've actually gone in the other direction. And so we have a lot of value to add to the K-12 system. We organize ourselves by meta majors. So a student says, I'm interested in this general area, and we start to refine that. That's great if you're doing that for a student walking in your door in college, but it's even better if you're doing that for a student that's in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So by the time they come to community college, they have a much more refined sense of where they want to study. And so one of the things I did within the first 8 months is invest in post-secondary navigators going into public schools. The highest need public schools are getting these folks that know about these career paths that can help them to guide so they have the right kind of plans coming in so they're not wasting their time.
One of the things that's quite compelling from the research that we looked at is the role that good guidance plays. I mean, there's very little guidance for students, either in K-12 or in community college and beyond. And there have been pilot projects at various community colleges around the country of sort of offering really intense guidance to students, keeping an eye on them, helping them pick paths, connecting it up to careers, and the success rates are much higher.
Much higher.
Guidance really matters.
And the other thing we found is we have, if there's guidance, it's college guidance. It's not career guidance. And so we need to create both incentives and as well as, frankly, more resources around guidance was a big finding.
I think that's right, and I think it's been one of our challenges is, and one of the big opportunities for us is, we can create jobs and we can create opportunities and we can change the way we think about a workforce and the way we build a new workforce for the next generation. But that's really where we need a lot of help, and we've talked to many folks about this, is making sure that the right supply is there, the supply is there in a purposeful manner, and that it's well versed in what those opportunities are, because that's hard for us to do as an employer, is to go all the way back and do that work. But I will tell you, the thing Juan alluded to, which has been probably the most encouraging thing that I've seen in the last couple of years now, is our students, our apprentices. All of you have businesses or own businesses. Do you take referrals? You take referrals. Have you ever taken a referral from a community college student about hiring another community college student? Why is that different than somebody who may go to a big university who's referring someone from a big university, or a professor from the big university who calls up and says, hey, I've got this student who's a wonderful person. We're finding that our students speak for themselves. I was at an event not too long ago, and I got introduced to a gentleman from Englewood, and we were having a conversation. He was working with one of our apprentice network partners, Walgreens, and it was really amazing. And what this young man said to me is he was going to go home and tell his friends about the opportunity that had been created and what he was going to go do. And so I think that's how you start to change the behavior of the city. Is we need to empower folks like this to have that opportunity. We have a young man, Ahmed, who works for us, who told me 5 of his buddies who, after high school, decided not to go on and get an education, just got jobs doing miscellaneous things here and there, heard his story. He just got a full-time job offer from us, heard his story, and I've all enrolled. And I think I get a piece of that. I'm now enrolled in community colleges, right, because of the story that, and the success that Ahmed's had, and they see that as an opportunity. So I think that's a tremendous part of this story that we sometimes, forget about, is that success really breeds success, and there's this network effect that has taken place in many, many businesses. I think if we can create that in this area, we can be very, very successful.
Penny, I want to sort of broaden the lens a little bit here, because we're at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. We worked together on a Council on Foreign Relations report, and certainly, in my experience at CFR, we have never got as granular as this, things going on in particular cities around the country having to do with workforce development. You sort of ask, what the heck has that got to do with, foreign policy and international relations? I mean, what are the stakes here? Why, what happens if we get the future of work right in this country? What happens if we don't? What are the bigger stakes at play in this conversation that we're having here?
Well, when Richard Haas called and said that he wanted us to undertake this, Richard being the head of the Council on Foreign Affairs in New York,
and my boss, so she's going to be really
boss,
nice.
Basically he said, I said, Richard, why are you going to do this, or do you want to do this? You know how passionate I am, so I get why you call me. And he said, because if we don't get our economic, and I think he got this absolutely right. He said, first of all, our national security depends upon our economic security, and our economic security depends upon Americans believing they have opportunity, and that's at risk. And he said, second is our one of the greatest foreign policy tools we have is our ability to show other parts of the world how to create opportunity for others. And what's at risk right now is Americans feeling extremely insecure about their economic future, and therefore pulling in their sense of expansiveness. And you see that reflected in the current politics of the day and the current policies of the day that will ultimately undermine America's strength and America's national security.
And what concerns you there the most? What are some of the directions that?
Well, I think take immigration policy. So Americans feel insecure and they're like, okay, we don't want foreigners here, except what do we know about immigrants? Immigrants are more likely to start new businesses, which is an enormous part of our economic engine. They're risk takers in general. I'm not. Second is we're basically uninviting. 50% of our STEM people who are doing a master's or a PhD in STEM education today are people who come from another country. We're asking those people to leave as soon as they finish their education. I was just at a University of Chicago venture capital challenge, and one of the company that we wanted to pick as the #1 company, the 2 guys are from Israel. They can't get their visas renewed. We were going to give them the biggest amount of money, except they're probably going to go work for Amazon because they can't get a visa. It's crazy. And they were going to start a brand new company with huge potential. And there's not a day that goes by where I don't hear about a challenge regarding our inability to have the talent here that we want, particularly in our STEM and tech fields. And the problem with that is the multiplier effect of those jobs. Those jobs have a huge multiplier effect, which creates greater opportunity, whether it's for Accenture offering, consulting advice or IT integration, or it's the person running a restaurant who's servicing those folks who are creating jobs here. So that's one huge implication. The second is our ability to continue to innovate. And the third is, our new business formation. We do know that 40% of the Fortune 500 are started by either immigrants or children of immigrants. And so the data just tells you that, you know, having a sound immigration policy makes a huge amount of sense for our economic growth. And our anxiety is very much related to our current immigration policy.
I mean, Jim, I'm going to ask a question I should probably ask of the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Washington, but how do you talk about this with businesses? I mean, you know, you guys are pioneering some, you know, well, I wouldn't say necessarily pioneering because other businesses have done this before, but you're bringing it to Chicago, you're expanding. How do you talk about this in the business community and say, look, finding new ways to open opportunity for Americans who might not otherwise have these kind of chances, that's not only good for our business, it's actually good for the country. Are there ways to talk about that, to share that among business more broadly?
I think the answer is yes, certainly. I mean, we've been very focused on the doing the right thing, but also, as we said, this has not been, our employees add value, every one of them. Every one of our apprentices add value from day one, and we hold them to the same standard as we hold our other employees. So for us, it's really thinking about how are we going to fuel the big machine and have the talent we need to do the things that we need to do in the future, and how do we start to change the way we think about where we can draw on that talent and where we can bring that talent in the most effective and efficient way. And I think the pace of change that was mentioned earlier, right at the beginning, is really critical in that because you know, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on education and training of our own folks. But I think we need to even continue to start to challenge that, right? Is can we do enough of that? We've historically done that, and we've done it at scale. But I think we need to lean on other ways to train and develop our talent over time as well. So we've been very focused on that as our primary goal. So when we're out talking to other companies, you know, our message has been this makes sense, that this is just something you need to do. We get paid as executives to think about risk all the time and to think about, you know, ways to manage risk in our businesses and think about how we balance those opportunities that are out there. And this is one of the things that in workforce development is really important to us as an organization. I mean, people is what we do. I mean, we do a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, it's all about people. We're a large people-based organization, and we want to make sure we have the best, the most diverse, and the most competent talent on the planet. And this is just one of the ways we are going to make sure we do that.
Jim, can I just say?
Yeah, no,
Jim was at a meeting that the mayor organized. It was my 4th week, and it was a whole bunch of companies with a cybersecurity pain point.
Yeah.
You remember this?
I do.
And so they're all talking about what are we going to do? How are we going to get this talent? And you know, Jim speaks up, right, and says, you know what? You know where I'm getting my talent? I'm getting it from city colleges. Those same companies said to us, but you know, that this process takes too long to get a cybersecurity program up and running. It's going to take 2 to 3 years. Mayor Emanuel set up a partnership with Department of Defense. We learned how they do boot camp training. Last summer, we piloted an initiative, got Allstate, Trustwave, Exelon, McDonald's, several companies to do internships on the back end. Every one of those students, when they completed, got jobs. Starting this summer, we'll have it at 4 different colleges. We're talking about up to 100 people. You know, within about another year, we're talking about a pipeline of 300 into cybersecurity, partly because Jim stood up there and said, you can count on these folks. Partly because we found new and different ways of delivering educational value outside of the traditional curriculum. We went to a continuing education model. We're going to have to do a lot more of that to be nimble.
I want to tie back to something you said because I think it's really important, this notion of the silos and the lack of collaboration. You know, and Penny and I have had this conversation. I mean, and this, I don't mean this to sound arrogant or wrong, but we have the jobs. We can create the jobs. The jobs are there. I think the employers have to have a larger voice in the talent we need, when we need it, how we need it. And I think that's part of the partnership we've been able to build with city colleges here. We're doing with other folks elsewhere. I think that's really important. I think we have to kind of, as employers, take that responsibility back a little bit and challenge ourselves that says, if this is the skill or the talent I need, what's the most efficient, the best way to get that talent? And again, this is not every job in our organization, right? We're a very diverse organization. We do lots of different things. We need lots of different types of talent. But I do think it's really, really important that it starts with the employers, and the employers are really thinking hard about how to insulate your business and do the things that make sense for your business.
Can I ask a question, one last area, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience here, which is, we've been talking more about young people here and opening up opportunities. There are real mid-career issues, right? I mean, we know, for instance, in the 2000s, about 6 million manufacturing jobs disappeared in this country, about a third of the total. That was a big hit. You look at the amount of money that the United States spends on worker retraining, it's a fraction of what is spent in most European economies. We spend less than any other OECD country outside of Mexico and in Chile. What kinds of things need to happen at the mid-career level? Maybe Juan, I'll start with you. You've got a big adult education program at City College in New York. And maybe Jim, you can talk a little bit about what you do for people in Accenture mid-career. But what are the special challenges of dealing with people who either lose their jobs mid-career or need to be retrained for different things? I mean, AT&T is in the process of retraining much of its workforce to deal with modern mobile technology. Is that a different problem? What are the similarities with young people? How do you see that issue?
Well, so first of all, many of the apprentices that Jim has taken, some of them are mid-career as well.
Yeah. It
and
applies to both.
But I will say, I think different formats, these sort of boot camp formats are one. Obviously, online learning, if you look at we still have a very limited online learning capacity, but it's almost exclusively folks that are mid-career trying to make a shift or a change.
Does retraining work? I mean, there are a lot of people who say it's impossible to take a steel worker and teach him or her to be a coder. That retraining programs have not had a very good track record in this country. Does it work?
Well,
where does it work?
My experience is the challenge is that there's a person that's been on the job for 10, 20, 25, 30 years, and they haven't been continuously trained. And so both the companies and the individuals are going to get in the mindset that you've got to cycle in and out of education on a regular basis. And that just hasn't happened.
I mean, when we look at our business, we talk about, publicly that 60% of our business is rotated to the new. So over the last 5 to 10 years, we fundamentally believe that the 440,000 people we may have today, which may be 445 tomorrow, that more than half of the work is different fundamentally than it was 5 years ago. So I think in our culture, we're constantly retraining and rebuilding our workforce, but we're also looking for partners to help us do that, right? And for unique ways to go get those skills. And I think this is instrumental in that, and I think it can be something. I think also, in our business, we do a lot of business process outsourcing work, and we believe that you talked about automation and robotics and some things earlier, you referenced it, probably a third of those jobs are going to go away because we're going to automate them. So we're also out there, and I think many of our clients are out there trying to lead in this. Now, the core job goes away, but there are new jobs that get created because we need people to do that work. And so I do believe fundamentally that we can retrain and we can rebuild skills and talents. I think we have to do it faster than we've done before because the pace of change, which we talked about earlier, is also accelerating. And so we won't have the benefit of going back to school and going for a 4-year degree to learn a new skill. By the time you're done, that skill's old. So I think we're going to have to get a lot better at this notion of continuous learning and developing people much more quickly.
And Penny, you had an example from Chicago you used in a couple of our sessions about the man who was a plant manager for a long time and about
Corey Powell.
Can you tell that because
the person that I kept in mind when we were talking about there were numerous individuals I kept in mind. One was the steel worker who was displaced, and another is a guy named Corey Powell who was a manufacturing supervisor on the south side of Chicago, and they automated his plant floor and he lost his job. And he was unemployed for about a year and really struggling to figure out how to get back in the workforce. And happened on Facebook to see Skills for Chicagoland's Future. And he got involved in a program that helped him both gain some skills but also develop the ability to assess what were his strengths and articulate to an employer, here's what I know how to do and I've done for the last 15 or 18 years. He's now reemployed at Friedman Seating. He's also production supervisor there. He's gotten 2 raises and a promotion. I mean, the challenge as I see it is, it's not just that we have to get faster, we also have to have intermediaries that are easily available to help individuals, whether they're young and they need career counseling or they're in mid-career and they need both either how to present themselves, or they need to gain certain skills. We need a place where people say, hey, I know I can go there, whether it's online or it's centers that exist like Skills for Chicagoland's Future and others that help an individual, reposition themselves. And then know, where do I go to? Is it community college I go to? Do I go online and take a course? How do I navigate that pathway? And we've got to make that a lot more transparent and a lot easier for folks.
And it was one of the things that was I found a little humbling in doing the research. Is that other countries do this a lot better than we do. I mean,
yes.
It's a heck of a lot
The
better to
Swiss,
lose your
the
job
German.
in Denmark or Sweden or Germany than it is to lose your job in the United States. There are a lot of options, there are a lot of pathways, there's a lot of guidance, there's a lot of help. Here in the United States, you lose your job, you're mostly on your own.
Basically.
And we've got a long, long way to go on that front. And you look at the numbers, labor force participation in the United States has been dropping, even as it's been rising in Europe. I mean, the headline unemployment numbers in the country are great, but there are a lot more people just out of the labor force, and that has all sorts of attendant social consequences.
And we have to have a cultural change that says we've got to invest in those resources to help people, because the companies need the folks, the talent. We need the, as you said, the muscle memory in our community colleges, but we also need intermediaries that can help individuals.
Okay, I would like to open this up for questions. Amelia, there are microphones going around, and she is going to be the master of ceremonies here for the question and answer portion of the period. Thank you.
Yes, so if you have a question, please raise your hand. Please wait for me to call on you and wait for the microphone. And if you're watching online, you can submit a question at chi.cnf.io. So we'll start in the second row from the back right there, the lady to your right. Yep.
Hi, great conversations, really important to Chicago. I'm Karen Teitelbaum. I'm the CEO of Sinai Health System on the south and west side of Chicago. And one sector that we didn't discuss is the recently incarcerated return to the community and how difficult it is for that particular sector to get back to work. And I think if we don't address that, we're going to continue to face the poverty and the violence. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Penn, you want to?
Yeah, in our report, we do talk about, the need to absolutely have programs locally that address the recently incarcerated. And frankly, Chicago is, through a number of different intermediaries, is helping our recently incarcerated who are looking to get back into the workforce, whether it's Heartland Alliance or it's other organizations that we've got. But frankly, it's to all of our benefit to help these folks who want to become part of the workforce and who have made mistakes in their past to be able to bridge. But this is the whole issue, the bridge, the pathway, the support structure. And so often, even if you get the business community and the educational community together, what we don't do is bring in the folks who can help someone have a bridge. These are where the NGOs can play a really important role. And we tend to underinvest in those efforts, the social service organizations that can help someone bridge from where they're at to where we're trying to get them.
Can I just say, we at City Colleges are utilizing those institutions that are so good at working with those populations that are critical to our workforce. But we would not be successful with those populations if not for skills, if not for Safer Foundation and other
Exactly.
bridges, as you mentioned.
And I don't think those organizations get enough airtime, frankly, among all of us so that we could rattle off those names easily. These are really vital institutions within our city that are working with those populations, and they're critical.
And that's an area we do some of that today, but I don't think without those organizations we would be able to get it done, frankly. I think what we did was hard. I think that's, for whatever reason, just harder, right? And again, it is what it is, unfortunately, but it is for us harder. And so without those organizations supporting us in the things we're doing, I think it's a bridge too far for us. So we have to have those organizations in place.
Great. Amelia?
So let's go to this side here, right down that aisle. Mm-hmm.
Thanks all for being here. I'd like if you guys could you all could comment on some recent related research Last year, Northwestern economist Bob Gordon published a book and argued also on this stage that productivity, despite all these technological advancements that you've discussed, will fall for two reasons. First, that our current measures just simply don't capture it accurately, but more importantly, that he believes all the technological advancements that significantly improve the human condition are in the rear view. Most today, in his opinion, serve only to accumulate capital more rapidly. So if we accept that premise, how do we protect workers who will see this fall or stagnation of productivity? And more importantly, how do we ensure that they are able to participate in the capital accumulation that the owners of their companies most certainly will?
Do you want me to just take a stab at it? Because I had to wade through all of the various economic research. There are big debates among economists, and we had some Silicon Valley folks on the task force who will tell you that Bob Gordon doesn't get it, that this, the new technologies are still in their early stages, and the potential for disruption has really only begun. I don't know exactly where to come down on that debate, except to let you know there is a big debate about those things, about the likely pace of change in the future. I mean, what you do raise is an important question, and it has to do with the sharing of benefits. And one of the effects of companies investing heavily in technology over time has been the returns have gone more to the owners of capital and less to employees. And those really do raise very fundamental social questions. And we try to tackle some of them in the report. We get into issues of minimum wage and taxation and other questions. There were some tough debates in the task force on this issue. But the educating people for the jobs that are available is very much part of it, but also making sure that in the productivity gains of the future that those are shared more broadly. We used to do that better as a country than we do today.
And the report basically comes down at the point we cannot continue to have the kind of disparate opportunity set or the great inequality that we've got today. We've got to address that, and this is part of what we're trying to do by whether it's training. We also talk about benefits and the fact that we need to make it easier for you to, in essence, agglomerate benefits, as many people also find work to be a portfolio of things as opposed to a job. We're talking about with apprenticeships, a job, but there are many people, and we have 55 million Americans who are either in the contract economy or part of the gig economy. And how can they accumulate, if you will, workers' comp or sick leave or retirement benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where we need also help with laws. And how do you make work pay? Can you make the earned income tax credit, which Ted makes a very cogent argument that we need to, first of all, start by changing that name. But second is that how do we make it easier for work to pay for most individuals?
I mean, there are sort of two challenges which I think both need to be dealt with. One is making sure people have the skills for the better jobs that are being created. That's a lot of what we've talked about on the stage here. But the other is making sure that all jobs pay better. And that's a separate but absolutely related challenge. Next question.
Thank you. So let's go to the back, to the very back.
I was at the HLTH conference a couple weeks ago, and Vinod Khosla was up on the panel, and he was commenting that Harvard Medical School has their admissions criteria all wrong today. It's no longer IQ, it should be EQ. I'd be curious, as we talk a lot about trades and kind of retraining, how do we get people early on to be capable of retraining faster, to learning faster, and to communicating better?
Throw that to the educators. One, I mean, yeah, please go. I have some thoughts, but go ahead. Yeah, please. Yeah.
I think it goes back to we've got to get them in. We're dealing with a population that it may not even be exposed to the kind of work environment where you can get your first opportunities at having to adapt, in having to be flexible, having to be part of a work team, right? Having the right emotional intelligence to work on teams, those kinds of things in a sort of professional setting. And so I think when Penny talked about the Americans that feel sort of left out, they are so left out that they don't get those basic opportunities to begin to hone their skills. They might get a chance to be at an educational institution, but that is not the same as being at Accenture.
And having the opportunity to have internships, I mean, this is something probably everyone in this room takes for granted. Your kid gets an internship, or you call your friend and say, could my kid work for your organization during the summer or whatever. We need to make this is why I think we're talking about a massive cultural change in this country that addresses lifelong learning, that makes, internships and apprenticeships far more of a norm, making sure there are intermediaries that can help individuals adapt. That's how you'll get faster pace of change and opportunity. But we're very far away from that as a country, and we need to start with folks like you've got right here who are making it happen, and then we have to celebrate those successes and make it far more available to more individuals within our own communities.
I think the difference is maybe too, we're a very large organization, and we're very accustomed, as I said earlier, to building programs and developing people. It's kind of what we do, and we're very proud of that. I think not every organization has that scale, and so I do think back at your question is we have to find outlets for people to learn fast. And it doesn't mean I have to go get a 2-year degree even. I can go get a certificate like the security opportunity with the partnership with the DoD that we put together with city colleges is a great example of that, right? So it's in a matter of 16 weeks or whatever it is, you can go and you can now have this in your hand. And it's probably not enough on its own, but if you add it to a few other things you've done, it can be very credible. And so the question is, are there enough of those types of programs out there for people to rapidly go and learn and do things? A lot of our folks in our organization will go online and they need to learn how to code, some of our IT folks, and they'll just go figure it out. I think back to the counseling and providing folks, people don't know that. So if you're not in the mainstream economy and you're not in a mainstream job, finding even those opportunities is very difficult. And you don't think about those things as ways you could advance yourself. And then you don't have the opportunity of somebody pulling you in on the other side.
I want to make sure that we get a question from online, and it actually ties in well to what you just talked about. How do we change the cultural perceptions of apprenticeships in America, where much of our mythology on the American dream is tied into going to college?
You want to talk about that, Penny? I mean, we talked about this quite a bit on the
Yeah, I
past
think that this is, again, it requires us to celebrate the successes, and it requires us to demonstrate and make it far more transparent what are the opportunities that are available. And that's one of the biggest challenges. So whether you're someone who, there are tools that have now become available also that can help with pathways, that help individuals understand, how they can get from where they are to where they're trying to be without having to go to a 4-year school. The other thing we saw is there are certain states where they actually had to change the laws. The incentives exist basically to counsel towards 4-year colleges, which is great for the 30% if we're lucky of Americans that are going to actually graduate from 4-year college. Problem is we have kind of 0 for the 70%. So it means we've really got to also repurpose the fact we need to make it easier to use your Pell Grants for training and for other, the federal funding that we've got.
And just quickly, we have to get rid of this either-or mentality.
Exactly.
I mean, the notion that a 4-year college degree is the ticket to everything, wages not been going up for 4-year college graduates for 15 years either, unless you're getting an engineering degree. But there's a lot of good research. Burning Glass has done this amazing report that shows, if you're an English graduate, you're going to start at a pretty low level. But if you throw on that, graphic design skills or software skills or coding skills,
exactly.
or if you're blending both the skills and the education, then you're much more attractive to employers. So we just can't see this as an either-or.
I was going to say that, right? That was going to be my initial response. Is it's the ability to learn and the ability to apply what you learn. It doesn't really matter what the piece of paper says. It's back to what I said earlier. If in our culture, if somebody comes in and they're doing a good job and they came from a 2-year degree. There's a guy, we were at an award ceremony with the governor not too long ago, Andrew. And Andrew told the audience, you were there, I think, told the governor that he was going to have my job.
Yeah.
And I hope he does, because then our program's working, and not only that the opportunity we gave this young man is working, but the training that we do and the development we do, and he's adapted and he's learned more and he's applied himself, because he's going to need to do that to get there. but I hope he does.
And that'll get back to the parents eventually.
But Jim, part of what has to happen also is for those of us who are running larger organizations is the folks who are recruiting for us and the folks who are hiring for us have to begin to do recruiting and hiring based on the skills that you've got as opposed to the degrees and the certificates that you've got. And so that's a whole change in both nomenclature and process. And there are tools that have been created like Credential Engine, which you guys have been very involved with at Accenture, to online basically translate what do I know how to do so that a business can understand those skills and be able to say, therefore you would be a fit for certain jobs. The same way we have the challenge with veterans. You know, veterans are trained, our military are trained to do so many things. Very difficult to translate that into what does that mean you're capable of doing in a business environment. We've got to have a better system to be able to do that.
We got to train our people.
One last very quick one. We're going to go right there.
Hi, thank you. How do we bring this to scale? Were there any thoughts in the report, Secretary Pritzker? You've talked about really a massive cultural shift that needs to probably take place in the country, and some of the others have talked about other countries. How can we incentivize businesses, particularly since a lot of folks find government involvement are adverse to that? How do we bring this to scale?
So I think there's really two avenues to go to scale. I think first of all, business leaders, I didn't meet a business leader in this country who didn't tell me they were short on the skilled labor that they needed. So that one thing that's happening is you're seeing business leaders demanding change because they're struggling to find the human capital and the individuals that they need, which is really terrific. I also think it's local. At the end of the day, it requires what you're seeing happening here. And that can be motivated by business leadership. It can be motivated by local political leadership, and it can be motivated by university leadership. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we've got to do exactly what's happening here between these folks. They're coming together to say we're going to solve these problems, and we're going to create solutions that are that can be replicated and brought to scale. So you listen to Juan talk about that. What we tried to do was identify where things are working so that other mayors and other governors and other business leaders in other cities can basically copy and replicate. But at the end of the day, the execution's going to be local. It's not a federal initiative. So we really geared our report towards governors, mayors, and business leaders as the #1 consumers because we felt that that's where change is going to occur and that they could learn from one another.
And just to add then, locally, that's what we tried to do with the Chicago Apprentice Network here, is we said this isn't about Aon, it's not about Accenture. This is about how do we bring the employment community together, help us learn from each other, take some chances together, and get this done. And so what we're out doing is encouraging others to join us in that and try to participate and learn from what we've done, leverage the relationships we have, make this work for you. And we think that's how we scale, here locally, that if we can get the business community to rally around what we're doing and join us, and we're making great progress at that, a year from now we'll be talking about multiple hundreds of jobs, and a year after that, thousands of jobs. And so that's the hope that we're after locally.
And then the virtuous cycle that occurs is that the business community insists that the their local community colleges are providing that kind of service, and the community colleges are insisting then that the K through 12 system is more integrated, and that's how you get the change. And sometimes it requires actually legislative change within the states in order to accomplish these goals. But in some respects, it's the bottom-up demand that's critical.
Yeah.
So,
I just wanted to
I'm going
share.
to have to give you the last word, 30 seconds, because we're over time.
I just want to share that it will take lots of vision from our business leaders. I mean, within a 2-week period, I sat down with Jim, and he said, we can go down this path or we can go down that path. And the path that he was talking about was the path of real jobs inside his company that provide real value to their constituency. I don't see how we get there if our business leaders don't really step
Exactly.
up in a major way.
And I think there's no question that's more broadly where we need to get to as a country. So let's thank our three speakers for a tremendous discussion. Well done.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. As a reminder, our bar is open for continued conversation, and don't forget to pick up a copy of the report on your way out. Thank you.